Hello and welcome to Amy's Opinions. Today we are going to be talking about guns and gun owner responsibility. I'm joined by my husband Lawrence and my son Lewis. So, the right to bear arms has been in the Second Amendment of our U.S. Constitution. It's been a very important part in American life. It was ratified December 15th, 1791, so that the U.S. citizen could protect themselves and their property. Now, there's a history behind this with the government trying to change and redefine the core heart of this amendment. Initially it was so we could protect personal defense and national defense. Lawrence, you want to go into a little bit of the history on the changes on that?
Yeah, so originally, as written, the right to keep and bear arms was for everybody. It didn't matter who you are, what you did. There was no checks, there was no balances. You didn't have to show identification or anything. What having the firearms for was so that when there was any kind of issue, they could call up the National Guard or any kind of a self-defense force, and everybody around would have the firearms to be able to take into that conflict of whatever it happened to be. During the westward expansion, when you have the cow towns and everything, and there was really no real good law enforcement, what a lot of the towns would do is make the cowboys check their guns before they went into the town, usually with the sheriff. You go in, you drink, you wouldn't be able to do too much damage without your firearm. The next day, when you were leaving to go back to the range, you pick up your guns and away you go. Other than that, there really wasn't any kind of regulation on it until you get to the 20th century, roughly, when you had the gang violence and stuff, especially in Chicago or your other large cities, and they started cracking down. That's when a lot of your legislation came about that outlawed or at least greatly restricted your fully automatic weapons. And it wasn't until later, really after Reagan was shot, when they attempted to assassinate him, that they really put in hardcore gun regulations where you had to do background checks and everything else before you could buy a firearm. Realistically, now where you have to have a concealed carry permit in a lot of states to carry concealed. Not every state, but most of them. Some states are open carry, but there's different rules from different states. Every state kind of has their own rules, but they've really legislated how you can carry them, how you can own them. And depending on what state you're in, you can be perfectly legal in one state, cross the border, and all of a sudden you're a felon and you're going to prison for years.
Okay. So part of this conversation is being a responsible gun owner. Would you agree that if you own a gun and you're going to carry that, you need to know what the regulations are for the area that you're in and the area that you might be going to?
I would say absolutely. That's just part of being a good, responsible gun owner. It'll, at the end of the day, it'll keep you from getting into trouble too, right? If you know what the laws are and you're following the laws, you're going to be just fine carrying them, and you shouldn't have any worries. It's when you're ignorant of those laws and there's a big change, or when you go from one state where your license is perfectly valid to another that refuses to recognize your license, that you can get into big trouble.
Now, when we first got married, I was very against having firearms, mainly because in the house, because of the family that dynamics I grew up in. And when we were back in our day, when we were first getting married, there was a lot of instances, a lot of news media around that time with kids getting their parents' firearms and shooting each other. So, it's very anti-gun. You've done a lot of work to get me not so much anti-gun, but accepting gun in the correct circumstances. Personally, I'm a horrible shot, so I would not rely on a gun for my personal defense.
Well, yeah, but you don't ever actually practice with it. You don't enjoy shooting, and so you refuse to most of the time, and that's perfectly fine. If you're not comfortable with the firearm, I prefer you not to have one.
Now, Lewis, do you remember the first time Dad took you shooting?
Not really, no.
No, do you remember taking Lewis shooting for the first time?
Yeah, it was when he was, 10, 11, something like that.
And we had that juvenile 22 rifle.
Just a single shot, 22 rifle.
Lewis, do you remember some of the rules that Dad used to really impart on you when it came to handling a firearm?
Well, not if he didn't go, or if he doesn't remember going.
No, but we've taken our kids shooting before.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, just the main three, don't aim at what you're not, looking to shoot at.
Okay, what else? That's one.
Treat every weapon as if it's loaded.
And what does that entail?
Well, if you don't know what the condition of the, gun is, don't go up pulling the trigger on it.
Okay, and what's the third rule?
See here, keep it pointed down range.
All right.
Keep your finger off the boom switch.
So we have taken our children shooting. We do target shooting. Well, mostly Lawrence and Lewis, because the girls, Alicia does too. Maggie and I were not big fans of guns. We don't like loud noises, and it's just not really our thing. And so we're kind of diverse in our family. But I do believe that there's a certain amount of gun owner responsibility. One of them is knowing the regulations of the area that you're in. Lewis, what would be another responsibility? Because I know you're growing your gun collection. What's one of the things that you do to make sure your guns are in good condition?
I generally take care of them, keep them locked up when I'm not using them. But when I do plan to use them, I take them out, give them a quick cleaning, and then go have fun. And once I'm done, they come home and go right back into the safe.
Do you clean them after you shoot with them?
I probably should. Make cleaning them a whole lot easier.
Lawrence, what do you think are good responsibilities if you're going to own a gun and a firearm?
You just follow the safety rules. They're tried and true. There's lots of examples of people who failed to follow them and the bad results that's come from that. Shooting doesn't have to be dangerous, but if you don't respect it, you don't follow those safety rules, you're going to have a bad day. So basically, follow the laws. It's important. It'll keep you out of trouble. Follow the safety rules, and you'll never have any issues.
Now, do you remember one of the first times you took me shooting?
Sure.
You got mad at me because I was showing off and I was going to shoot a bird, and I ended up shooting over orchards where people were working.
You didn't shoot over the orchard. You just got darn close, and we stopped you before you actually did it.
So I think what a lot of people don't realize is what goes up comes down.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't realize how far that little bullet's going to fly either.
I've seen several instances. I know, Lewis, you're now working in a healthcare setting. I'm sure you've seen instances where people are celebrating and they're shooting up in the air and they come in and they have GSWs, not necessarily from being shot at, but from the bullet coming back down. Have you experienced?
What is the GSW?
A GSW is a gunshot wound.
Okay.
But I'm talking not self-inflicted or intentional GSW. I'm talking about kind of, how would you say it?
Accidental.
A passive GSW. Someone shoots up in the air, and it's not intentional to hit anything. They're just
Somebody
shooting.
else was being negligent, and you got injured because you got hit by the bullet as it came back to Earth.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, see that the first time I think I experienced that was in Washington State, and it was I was still in my first year of nursing, and we had people coming in that were shooting for New Year's Eve or 4th of July, something like that, and they're shooting up in the air, and they were coming in with inflicted gunshot wounds.
Yeah.
Because they didn't get out of the way. They didn't think, oh, hey, the bullet's going to land at some point.
No care for anybody that was around was going to get hit because they wanted to go party and be dumb.
Well, not necessarily that, or, you have a lot of media influence on how people hold weapons and how they anticipate it's going to act. And you look at these movies and things like that, and you see, the old Western, they're shooting up in the air, and no one's moving because they're just shooting up in the air and they're shooting straight up, no one thinks that it would come right back down at them. I mean, would you? If you didn't have experience.
I mean, no, probably not if I didn't have any experience. But I mean, take a stone and throw it up in the air and find out what happens.
What about you, Lewis? What do you think? If people watch the media, do you think that's a good representation of gun ownership?
That depends on which media they're. For an example, your gun YouTubers, the ones that go out, show you, hey, this is the rifle that we're doing today, is how we use it.
So educational videos.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're educational.
They're informational for sure. There's plenty of bad examples out there, but there's a lot of really good examples too. If you don't know the first thing about firearms, you're probably not going to be able to tell the difference. What I would suggest is that you find a range with a pro there and take a few lessons. Learn how to use the firearm. Learn how to shoot it and load it and unload it and everything to do it safely. And then start kind of paying attention to what's going on and looking for videos and that sort of thing. Some of them are pretty obvious that you shouldn't do what they're doing because they're being silly. Hollywood is not the source you should look to. There's some that have been pretty accurate, but in general, just stay away from Hollywood. They're going to lead you wrong.
A generation that does a lot of YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of people put things out. Is that where you find most of your gun information?
It can be. A lot of it also comes from the games I'm playing as well.
For instance, what?
Well, take GTA or Halo, for example. It's where I got my love of bullpups from.
Now, what exactly is a bullpup? Because I'm thinking it's like a bulldog puppy, or... Can you explain that to me?
So all a bullpup is compared to a regular gun is the trigger assembly is in front of the magazine.
Okay.
Where a regular gun, the trigger assembly is behind the magazine.
Now, do you think shooting in real life compares to shooting in a video game?
That depends on the game, because there's some pretty realistic games out there now.
Grand Theft Auto is not one I would look to.
But things for like Ready or Not, which is a SWAT simulator game, came out. That's pretty realistic when it comes to the models and stuff like that, and how you can somewhat expect a gun to behave.
Now, what about recoil? I mean, you don't get the recoil from those guns, do you? If you're playing a video game?
Not yet, but the screen shake is there to simulate it recoiling. It'll throw your aim off.
So you get reaction, but you don't get 100% reality.
No, not yet. I mean, with the advances in VR technology, it really won't surprise me if one day that won't be a thing.
Okay, now let me go off topic with this one a little bit. With all the increase in school shootings, because that really happened after we left the public schools. That really happened more in our children's generation. Do you think the video games influence, you know, like GTA and Halo and all the shooting games, do you think that has any influence on school shootings? I mean, what do you think, Lou? You're the one that plays the games and you're the one that is in that generation where they've had the school shootings.
I don't think so.
Why is that?
Because guns have been around for ages. Everyone has some experience with them, whether it's media, like movies, or video games. And all honestly, the uptick in gun crimes, especially school shootings, happens due to kids getting into things they shouldn't be, whether it's games, drugs, or mental related, and getting guns that they shouldn't have, whether it's breaking into their parents' safe or getting them illegally from a vendor, that kind of a thing.
So do you think if a parent has a gun in the house, is the parent's responsibility to teach the kids safe handling of that fire weapon? Whether it means don't touch it, hey, we're going to keep bullets here, guns here, or hey, this is what we expect you guys to do with this. Or even taking them to the range and letting them see what it feels like to fire.
Of course, because otherwise kids are going to go off what they see off movies and games, because that's the only other experience they have. lo and behold, an accident or a tragedy occurs.
Now, the other thing is, do you think that parents should be monitoring their kids playing these video games that have these violent shootings? I mean, what age would it be appropriate?
I mean, if a game is rated mature, don't let, some 13-year-old play it. Get the right games for the right age group that kid is part of.
So do you think that's a part of gun responsibility, is making sure the kids aren't exposed to weapons or media, games, movies, things like that, so that way they have a realistic expectation of weapons?
Now, that is going to be hard to answer, because recently movies like Marvel, they got guns in them, but they're rated PG-13. That's exposing kids to that problem too.
Lawrence, what do you think?
No, I think it's totally on the parents to educate the kids. You can play all the video games you want, you can watch all the movies you want, but if your parents aren't there actually teaching the kids, they're going to grow up with skewed values. Kind of the cool thing about a video game is it's no consequence if you lose. So when you're in a video game and you're shooting whatever you're shooting, there's no consequence to it other than you have to reset and start over again. Real life doesn't work that way. And you have to, as a parent, make sure that your children know the difference.
Okay. Now, do you have any other thoughts on gun responsibility? Because we can get into the government trying to limit guns and all this other stuff. That'd be a topic for another day, because that'd be a much longer, more abbreviated. What are your final thoughts on being a responsible gun owner?
Realistically, know your laws. Practice with the firearms that you have so that you can use them, whatever you're using them for, but so you can use them safely, and that you can use them properly. Understand the consequences for the misuse, and just make sure that you're being as safe as you can. There's a lot of people that advocate that they should always be locked up if you're not going to use them. Some states, it's a law that you have to have them locked up if you don't use them. I think that's up to the individual and what they are comfortable with.
Okay. Lewis, your final thoughts on this?
Honestly, but I don't really know. I mean, it's a two-way street with how people want to do things. So
in your view, what makes you a responsible gun owner?
Well, not shooting anyone that you don't want to shoot.
Okay, that's pretty...
So do you want to go to the school and shoot a bunch of kids? That's cool?
No, not really.
Right.
So we're gonna end on my opinion. My thoughts on being a responsible gun owner is, I agree with my husband. You should know the laws. You should know your firearm. You should know how to take care of your firearm. And you should educate any children that are in your house on real expectations on that firearm. We had, growing up, one key to our gun safe, and it was either my husband or myself. It was never with the kids. Kids didn't have access to that. We taught them young how to respect the firearm and the danger it could do. We took them to the range. We let them shoot with what was appropriate for their age and their size. We taught them the 3 major rules. Don't keep your finger on the trigger. Always aim downrange, and only aim at what you expect to shoot. And for our family, shooting, Lawrence, you grew up hunting, which you haven't done since we've been married. I'm sorry. There's life got happened.
I mean, there's a bunch of reasons why I haven't.
Life. Lewis, you grew up going to the range in Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a family where firearms were not appropriate for the family situation that I was in. And so I was very timid, and I'm still timid around firearms.
Yep.
But the knowledge that you can have helps with that timidity, helps with that fear. And ultimately, it's not the gun that's causing destruction. It's the person who's using that tool. And therefore, you should be responsible to know what that tool is, what it does, how to take care of it, and how to protect yourself and others around you. And that's it for this video today. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.